RollingStars.com.
I don't care. I want I want to beat up this person who took my wife. Lewis's yells echoed throughout the halls, his face flushed after having a run down the stairs. AJ stood awkwardly beside him. He'd never seen Lewis this way. A robe-burst man stood up between Lewis and the office door, crossing his arms and denying him entry. The freckled man's glare couldn't have been pierced through his skull. Before Lewis had time to protest any longer, the office door opened and Javi stepped outside. "It's okay, Charlie. Let them through," he commanded. The man named Charlie nodded at Javier and stepped aside, eyeing Lewis and AJ warily. They followed Javier in, and the older man sighed in frustration. Once inside, a number of candles had been lit, casting an odd shadows on the wall. Eleanor and Gabe stood to the side. The latter has been on his hands and pockets, his eyes adverting Lewis's general area. "What the hell happened?" Lewis began by the way of introduction, slamming his head on Javier's desk. "I woke up a few minutes ago, and a woman telling me that my wife is missing." "Lewis, I know how you feel," Javier began, before cutting off. "No, you don't know how I feel," the man splat, fire burning within his brown eyes. "Now tell me what happened." He seethed, venom in his words. He heard Gabe cleared his throat and then turned to the man, waiting for an explanation. Gabe walked to his uncle's side, crossing his arms and leaned against the desk. He sighed and looked down. "Clem and I were hunting earlier," he began, piercing his lips. "At one point she had to go to the bathroom, so she walked off." "And you let her walk away alone?" bellowed Lewis, throwing his arms in the air. "What was I supposed to do?" Gabe shot back and stood up straight, even when Lewis still towered over him. Magnanimously, You wanted me to go with her?" "Of course you do, you moron," Lewis snapped. "You don't let a pregnant woman go by herself in this world." Gabriel shook his head, blinking rapidly. "Hold on," he mumbled. "What do you mean, pregnant?" Cussing to himself under his breath, Lewis reeled back, kicking a trash can, and he ran his head through his hair, a habit that he had picked up from Clem a long time ago. "All right, yes," he conceded, rubbing his face. "Clementine's pregnant. We didn't want to tell you because we weren't ready to tell people yet." "Then how was I supposed to know that?" Gabe spat, stepping forward towards Lewis. Eleanor and Javier watched from the sidelines, seeing the fight unfold. "You're supposed to look after her no matter what," Lewis reminded him. "That's just what Javier here says to us on the first day here. We always look out for one another on supply runs," he repeated in a mocking tone. "I lost track of her for a second and it only cost you my wife." The man ran his hand through the dreads once more, pulling them back. AJ stood silently, watching his father figure spiral go into rage, nervously fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Javier stepped in between Gabe and Lewis, sighing. "Look, I know the situation sucks," he began, attempting to cool out the sensations, "but we can't just keep arguing amongst themselves. We have to figure out a plan to get Clementine back, okay?" "Yeah, damn right we do," Lewis exclaimed, slamming his fist on the desk. "I mean, she could be dead for all we know," Gabe commented, crossing his arms. Fast as lightning, Lewis lunged himself at the man, taking a hold of his shirt and collar, and he pinned Gabe to the wall, his eyes turning the deep shade of black. "Say it again," he demanded, his face barely an inch away from Gabriel's. "Say my wife is dead." "All right, sorry," Gabe sputtered, lifting his hands in the air. The freckled man let go of the other's shirt and stepped back, his nostrils still flaring. Javier helped Gabe up and stood, and Eleanor, who looked at the office, looked at Gabe, to Lewis and then AJ. The boy crossed his arms. His stance was in the matter of clear. "You guys go cool off, and we'll talk about this later." Reluctantly, Lewis agreed and was ushered outside by AJ. The boy gripped his hand firmly. They walked down the hallways. Some people's heads were turned to their direction. Lewis turned to the corner of his eyes, AJ trailing Lewis behind him with downcast eyes. Once in the suit, Lewis let himself fall into the king-size bed inside. He muttered. What is this world got to? He rubbed his eyes. When did things get so complicated? This is a dream, right? My dreams usually include Clementine, AJ commented, sitting beside him on the bed. I don't think so. A little positively would be nice, kiddo, the man jested, attempting his best to smile he could muster. AJ eyed him curiously. Pretty hard for a big optimistic, Louis. Yeah, I know, Louis said as he sat up, looking down at the boy. How are you holding up? He placed a comforting hand on the kid's shoulder, squeezing it lightly. AJ looked down at his hands and sighed. Do you really think Clem's alive? I know she is, Louis assured him, nodding. I have to, he whispered. The boy silently stood up and walked towards the adjoining room's door. Louis watched him leave, fighting back the tears as the door clicked shut. Behind AJ, Louis let himself flop onto the bed. A heavy sigh escaped him from his lips. He rubbed his face venomously, unsuccessfully trying to wake himself up. Although he thought it was a dream, a nightmare, more like it, he thought. This is one of the worst fears that ever came true. After all, he sat up looking through the window. Afternoon and the sun shone over the streets of Richmond as a score of people miled about their day. A rubber cement woman pinned clothes to a long wire that hung between buildings. A small girl was handing her pins to the woman as she worked, cheerfully humming a tuneless song. His attention was taken by a girl who had short brown hair and glasses. Her cheeks were red and her eyes were light with joy. She wore a simple sundress and her exposed knees were scraped, probably just from playing with the other kids on the block. His thoughts drifted to the dream that he might have had the night before. He couldn't remember much but his image of his daughter in the vid in his mind. She had beautiful golden eyes and a face full of freckles that would put him to his shame. He could still remember how incredibly happy he had been seeing her in the presence. Her chuckle had sent goosebumps to his arms. He thought about Clementine and her sudden disappearance when he couldn't just want to vanish out in the thin air like that. He knew whatever happened, someone had taken her, and he would find her. 2 hours later, Louis found himself sitting in a different room than before. Javier claimed it to be the commander center, and it was lined full of maps and terrain. Gabe and his uncle stood on one side, while on the other table, Louis stood on the other. The freckled man eyed the others widely, sulking in silence. A knock on the door had grabbed their attention. Come in, Javi commanded. As the door opened and Eleanor walked in. A woman was beside her. Louis saw the newcomer and frowned. It was the newcomer that he had bumped to on the street a month ago. He realized that she gave him a sympathetic smile, which forced himself to return. I didn't know you'd be joining us, Javi said to the gray-eyed woman, crossing his arms. Louis, this is Elizabeth. Lizzie, the woman corrected, extending a hand to him. Louis, he said, raising an eyebrow. Not to be rude or anything, but why is she here? He directed the question at Eleanor, who took a seat beside the chair on the table. Lizzie is head and he's the lead security in Richmond, she explained as Lizzie took her seat next to her. I figured we'd need some help being out sorting the situation. All right, more the merrier, Louis quipped, clapping his hands. Let's begin. As the people gathered around the table, Javi fumbled inside a chest to his right. Seconds later, he produced a map of West Virginia and laid it on the table, flattening out its edges. He examined it thoroughly and placing a finger on this one spot of the West. This is us, he announced, looking at it around. Gabe, where did you say you guys saw were before Clem disappeared? Gabe looked up at Louis and sighed, receiving a stern look from the freckled man. He bowed his head, searching for the map for the moment. The man jabbed a finger at a few spots south of Richmond's position. There we were, just a click away before the southern border. Did you see anyone? Lizzie asked, raising an eyebrow. Not really, he replied, shrugging. They did leave her hat behind, he added hastily, fumbling over his backpack. He offered it to Louis, who took it harshly from his hands. And you waited until to tell me? He spat. Gabe chose not to comment, instead looking down on the map and examining the zone around Clem's disappearance. They all stood silently inspecting the map, looking for clues on what could be there. At one point, Lizzie grasped it and looked up at Louis with a smile. What is that? He asked, confused. She turned to Javi and raised an eyebrow. You don't think it could be the right arm, do you? They wouldn't mess with us, would they? Piped Eleanor, in concern with filling her voice. Javi thought about it for a moment before looking at Clem's hat and then Lewis's hands. They would if they didn't know she was with us. Remember, Gabe wasn't with her, and she's very new to the community. Lewis's head snapped from Lizzie and to Javier and to Eleanor. Will someone tell me what's going on? Javi frowned and looked up at Lewis, piercing his lips. The Right Arm is a community of survivors that once lived in Richmond. They left about a year after Joan fell, he explained. Their leader is the ex-military man named John Myers, Lizzie continued. He believed in Joan's views, and he wasn't very happy with Javi's way of leading. He couldn't even try to organize a coup? Eleanor said as her brows were knitting. We got lucky when one of his associates confessed as it to be before it could happen. He's even ruining this community down south for years, but we've never been able to locate them. Okay, so what are they like, mole people? Lewis asked, making Lizzie chuckle. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. How will we rescue Clem if we don't know where they are? We don't even know if they do have her, Eleanor put in, frowning. She could have been taken by somebody else. Well, right now our best thing to do is the Right Arm business, Lewis argued, his shoulders tensing. Gabe and Javi shook their head and gave a look, and a spoken word was traveling between them. Lewis eyed them warningly, slamming his hands on the table. Stop doing that, he snapped, his nostrils flaring. If you don't have any ideas, say them out loud, if you have them. Javi nodded, and Gabe and the man squared his shoulders. We think there's someone who could help us. Clementine could feel the cold surface on the concrete floor pressed up against her cheek and her head pounding. Her stomach grumbled and her eggs ached. She attempted to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt heavy as lead. With every ounce of strength in her body, she propped herself onto her hands. She managed to turn around enough to see that she was lying on her back. Nausea overcame her, and she had the urge to throw up was unbearable. She leaned to the side and expelling what little contents were in her stomach. As she went back to her normal position, she finally had the strength to open her eyes, and when she did, her amber eyes scanned the room and the best place she could. She was definitely in a dimly lit room, a few chairs surrounding her with candles on them, giving the room the eerie glare. The walls were a dull gray with odd markings crawling across the surface. Most of them were words, although they didn't make much sense. Out. Dead, please. Clementine managed to sit up slowly, although her head was still pounding. She still got up, and her legs were almost giving out under her weight. How long had she been out of it? The wall seems to have been made out of concrete as well. A barred window stood up at the top of them, moonlight shining through. On the opposite of the wall, it was made entirely metal, its edges corroded from the years of disrepair, and it was a small compound at the chest height, and her side did not have the handle. Of course I get thrown in a prison, she muttered, angrily kicking the door. She heard a loud echoing metal sound erupted from it and recoiled. There was no answer to her protest for forthcoming, so she paced the room thinking of ways out. The window was much too small for her to crawl through, even in her ideal condition. The door seemed to be reinforced with the other side, probably to keep her locked up for good. Looking around, she could not see any sort of tools that she could disadvantage with it. That's it, she exclaimed, fumbling with her jacket. Damn it. Of course they took my knife. While she examined one of the chairs and its sturdiness, soft steps emerged from the other side of the door and unlocked it. She turned it just as soon as it opened slowly, and two armed guards walked in. One of them, a woman with a large scar on her cheek, stepped forward and promptly slapped Clementine, knocking her to the ground. She spat out blood onto the floor, looking up at the woman with fiery glare. The guards snickered at her, and she was about to strike her once more when someone whistled behind her. She stifled and stepped back, falling in line back with her partner from the floor. Clem heard a different set of footsteps. It was stronger and deeper. With some effort, she looked up at the man who now stood in front of her, eyeing at her wearily. A smile spread across his face. Well, hello there, Clementine.
Why, hello there, my little pretties. It's me, the Shadow Lioness. I hope you all enjoy my video of creepypasta. So, without further ado, if you liked the video, please leave a like. And if you want to survive my cave of terror, please hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Donate to my Patreon when you can. And the only way you're going to survive me in the cave is you're going to have to sub to me and press the bell for notifications so you'll get to know when I upload. Well, without further ado, my little pretties, I'll see you in the next video. Sweet dreams, my little pretties, and I hope in the next night I will traumatize you more.